Now, fans of Roald Dahl are celebrating 100 glorious years. Get it? The creator of children's classics, including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Big Friendly Giant, and The Twits, is one of the world's best-loved authors. And his daughter Lucy told Sky News he never forgot the darkness and loneliness of his own childhood. Well, I'm joined now by Roald Dahl's former doctor and the author of Roald Dahl's Marvellous Medicine, Tom Solomon, who's in our central London studio. Well, tell us a bit about the man himself, Tom. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. Well, he was a great author, everybody knows that, but what many people don't realise is that he was fascinated by medicine, and I actually looked after him. I was one of the doctors who looked after him in Oxford towards the end of his life, and I spent every evening talking with him all about his medical interest. And he actually invented, he was very inventive with his stories, but he also had some medical inventions. He invented a new device, a neurosurgical device, to treat hydrocephalus, to treat water on the brain, because one of his children had that. He also invented a new treatment for stroke, rehabilitation, because back then in the 1960s his wife had had a stroke and there wasn't really much in the way of rehabilitation, so he got her going again. He had everybody helping with the rehabilitation, and other people were interested in how this had worked because she recovered. Ultimately this resulted in the formation of the Stroke Association as we know it today. So he's actually benefited thousands of people around the world through his interest in medicine as well as through his books, and it's an untold story, really.
Yeah, I suspect not a lot of people know this. And are these devices, are these treatments, are they still in practice in some way, shape or form?
Well, the neurosurgical device, the valve to treat hydrocephalus, was used on about 5,000 children around the world, and it's been superseded in recent years, but it certainly proved very effective. And of course, stroke rehabilitation now, back in the 60s, when his wife had a stroke, she might get an hour of treatment a day in terms of the rehab, and he made everyone realise that you really need to rehabilitate very actively. And of course that's what we do now for all our stroke patients. I'm a neurologist. I work in Liverpool at the Walton Neurocentre, and even there many people don't realise that some of the things we do are based on ideas of his.
And was he self-taught? He obviously researched it meticulously, was a super intelligent man, but that medical and technical side, how did he acquire it?
Well, he was just very interested. He was a great man who was interested in lots of things. I was 24 years old, but he was very interested in me and what I was doing as a junior doctor. And when he told me about things like the valve to treat hydrocephalus and the stroke, he sort of mentioned them in passing, and I thought he was more or less teasing me about them. But actually, in writing the book, I went back and looked at all the original articles and in the archives and letters, and he basically, because of his thirst for knowledge, he just absorbed all these things, contacted people and put it all together with the help of appropriate doctors as well.
And how did you first come across each other? As you say, you must have been a very young man. Were you a bit in awe of the great Roald Dahl?
Well, I wasn't actually, because I was very busy. I was a junior doctor, busy on the wards, writing up my research, and the night I met him, I was busy typing away, and he sort of kept wandering past, and he was, I think, quite interested in me because I seemed to be paying him no attention at all, and eventually he stopped me and asked what it was I doing, and then we got chatting and we became good friends.
That's a fascinating story. And did you stay then, did you collaborate closely, did you stay in touch throughout the rest of his life?
Sadly, this was towards the end of his life, and I was actually the doctor looking after him when he died. And so, I would have loved to. I think we got very close over just a short period of time, a few weeks, and it would have been great to know him more. But of course, I've stayed very much in touch with his wife and his family, and of course, we all know him more because of the fantastic books. And of course, today is Roald Dahl Day. It's his 100th birthday, which is a fantastic date for me to bring the book out.
But that's what I wanted to ask you about, those books. Did you ignore him when he came into the hospital there because you didn't know who he was?
Well, yeah, exactly.
You didn't read the books?
I had read the books, but he was busy. Everyone was busy fussing and fawning over him, and I was just that night. I was writing up some research I'd been doing on brain problems in Africa, and I was busy doing that. And he just, like I say, eventually stopped, and I looked up. I heard this voice saying, "What are you doing?" And I looked up, and this tall man with twinkly eyes and big sticking out ears was looking down at me. It was almost like looking up at the BFG, but it was actually the BFG's author. And so I teased him a bit, and he teased me a bit, and we got on very well, really, and discussed all sorts of things, not just medicine, but literature, life, all sorts of stuff, and it's all in the book.
We've got one of those illustrations of a little doctor being held in the palm of the hand of the BFG. Is that your favourite book?
Well, that actually, somebody put that picture together as a sort of an interpretation of this great Roald Dahl figure and this young junior doctor. And the BFG, it's one of my favourites because, you know, interestingly, again, another story which I actually discovered through talking with him and then doing more research was that the BFG's language, gobblefunk, the reason why he thought of that was because his wife, Patricia Neal, who'd had the stroke, as she was relearning to speak, she came up with all of these funny words and he wrote them down, and several years later he put them all into the BFG. And I asked him about this because I had read the BFG and he was a little bit coy about it. But then he was very coy about a lot of this medical work, although, you know, he mentioned it in passing. When I looked into it, he'd done a lot more than he was letting on. But whenever anyone talked about these things, he always wanted to give the credit to others. So, you know, which was surprising for somebody who was very proud of his writing. He always said he wanted to be a doctor, and in some ways he's done more than many doctors ever do.
Well, some marvellous stories, Dr. Solomon. Thank you very much indeed for sharing them with us. And if people want a different dose of Dahl, you can get Roald Dahl's Marvellous Medicine by the very man, Tom Solomon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.